Hey everyone, this is Lisa coming back with a part 2 after the yarn bobbins. I am going to show you some of the supplies that I use when working on a graphghan. I guess the most important part of the supply list would have to be the pattern. So I created this small pattern. It's a small heart, which is 30 by 30. And when I say 30 by 30, it means that it's 30 stitches across and 30 rows down. So that's a pretty small blanket or a small item, I should say. Usually graphghans or lapghans, they usually go about 150 by 150 or about 200 by 200, or it could be 150 by 200 for a regular lap size lapghan. If you want to go bigger, like a twin size, those are usually like 150 by 300. 150 being the number of stitches across and 300 as far as the number of rows down. So here I'm actually creating a simple, very simple small heart graphghan using two colors. I'm using, even though the pattern has gray or white, I'm deciding to use the green as my background and pink for the heart. Here are some of the bobbins that I'm going to be using while working on this. I'm just really trying to use some of my scrap yarn that I have around. Sometimes when starting on a graph, you may use a whole roll or a whole skein of yarn before you divvy it out into bobbins, just because it's easier that way and it's easier to pull and stuff like that. Other things that you're going to need with this is a needle, hooker needle. You can use an eye needle, which is a 5.5 millimeter, or I like to go a little bit bigger and use a J, which is a 6.0 millimeter hook. The bigger the hook, the bigger the outcome. The smaller the hook, the smaller the outcome. So it's really up to your own preference and how you crochet and what your tension is and such. Other things that you will need along the way is you may need some stitch markers, which that's only a few. Usually you need a little bit more than that. You'll need a darning needle for sewing in ends, a pair of scissors, and a pattern. So the first thing I like to do when you're looking at a pattern is, or when I write my patterns, is I know people like to print their patterns out, so I tend to try to conserve as much space as possible. So you'll see on my pattern that I've highlighted rows, the actual tag row, and I've highlighted rows where there are multiple lines that have that you'll be doing the same stitch for. So for instance, in this one, row 1 through row 4, you're going to be stitching one color pretty much, and that's the background color. Then you start row 5. Row 5 is where you start getting into your color changes, and we'll go through that a little bit more. Row 9 through row 13, again, those rows you're going to be following those same steps all the way through. So I was trying to conserve space, and I highlight it so that you're aware that that's a multiple row stitch line. And what I've seen people do is take that multiple stitch line and write the numbers off to the side. So like this one's row 9 through 13. So I wrote row 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So as I finish each row, I will also cross those off so that I know that those have been completed. Other thing here is this is just a small diagram or small visual of what we're going to be doing. This part here tells you what color A will be. Color A is gray, which is your background, which is, and then the count says 474. Those numbers basically are your stitches, the number of stitches you'll be making with that particular color. So for instance, on a larger graphghan, you might see the background being, the color is gray and the count is 21,000. So then you start wondering, well, what's the math on that and how much yarn will I need? And you start wondering. The calculation that I like to use, so say for instance, if it was 21,000 was my stitch count for that, I would take 21,000, divide it by 3,000, and that gives me 7. 7 equals the number of 7-ounce skeins I would need to complete that background for that. 7 is a lot, but usually for the graphghans and bigger, you need a lot of yarn, believe it or not. So 7, so you can look at it as 7 times 7, so you need 49 ounces of yarn. Most of the yarn, let's say if you get it from like Red Heart, they come perfect with 7 ounces. I'm trying to find where they have the yards. There, here we go. So like Red Heart shows 7 ounces, 198 grams, and each 7 ounces, 364 yards. So if it's 364 yards for 7 ounces, take 7 times 364, and whatever that number comes out to be, that would be the number of yards of yarn you approximately need to do your pattern. And again, that's just the background. So graphghans do take up a lot of yarn and patience. So for this one, for instance, this is a very small one. I only need a little bit of yarn and a little bit of gray and a little bit of pink, or a little bit of green, a little bit of pink. So that's what we have right here. Other things you need are a pair of scissors, bobbins. You may need a stitch counter. That's if you want to take breaks or you're trying to count your stitches and you want something electronic or something digital to help count with you. But that's it. So I'm going to start another video with this and we'll see how it progresses. Thank you.